Just when the world thought tensions between Israel and Syria had calmed down, an unexpected and shocking attack has rocked the Middle East. But what's really happening? Why has Israel launched this latest strike on Syria? To understand this, we need to delve into the history of the region. The Israel-Syria conflict has deep roots, with decades of hostility and intermittent warfare. Despite numerous attempts at peace, the region remains a powder keg, ready to explode at any moment. This latest attack is just another chapter in a long and complicated saga. Stay tuned to find out the truth behind one of the most explosive conflicts of our time. For decades, Israel and Syria have been at odds, caught in a web of territorial disputes, military clashes, and political unrest. The animosity between the two nations dates back to the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, when Israel declared independence, leading to the first Arab-Israeli conflict. Over the years, this hostility has been fueled by several wars, including the Six-Day War in 1967, and the Yom Kippur War in 1973, which saw significant territorial changes. So, when we hear that Israel has once again launched an attack on Syria, it's not entirely surprising, but it's still shocking. But why now? What triggered this new wave of aggression? Let's break it down. On the surface, it may seem like just another chapter in the ongoing conflict, but this latest attack comes after a series of escalating incidents. In the past few weeks, reports surfaced of Syrian military forces increasing their presence near the Israeli border, along with heightened threats from Syria's key allies, including Iran and Hezbollah. These alliances have long been a source of concern for Israel, who view these groups as a direct threat to their security. The situation escalated further with recent Israeli airstrikes targeting key military installations in Syria. International reactions have been swift, with global leaders calling for de-escalation and peace talks. Meanwhile, civilians continue to bear the brunt of the conflict, with humanitarian aid efforts struggling to keep up. Then, reports of airstrikes in Syria by Israeli jets started making headlines, with Israel confirming they were targeting Iranian weapons shipments headed for Hezbollah, a group that has been wreaking havoc in the region for years. This attack is seen as a clear message from Israel. They will stop at nothing to protect their borders from potential threats. Eyewitnesses reported seeing massive explosions and hearing the roar of jets overhead. Local residents were in shock, describing the scene as chaotic and terrifying. Military experts believe this strike was strategically planned to disrupt the flow of weapons to Hezbollah. News anchors have been discussing the implications of this attack on regional stability. Political leaders around the world have reacted strongly, with some condemning the attack and others supporting Israel's right to defend itself. The United Nations has called for an emergency meeting to address the escalating tensions. The political fallout from this attack is already being felt across the Middle East. Israel's actions are not only sending a message to Syria, but also to Iran, Hezbollah, and other regional powers. Some experts believe this attack could be the beginning of a larger military escalation in the region. If Syria decides to retaliate, it could lead to a full-blown conflict. Already, Syrian officials have condemned Israel's actions, warning of severe consequences for what they describe as a violation of their sovereignty. The United Nations has called for an emergency meeting to address the escalating tensions. Meanwhile, the European Union and NATO have urged both sides to exercise restraint and seek diplomatic solutions. Protests have erupted in various countries, with people demanding an end to the violence and a peaceful resolution. The international community is watching closely, with the United States and European leaders calling for restraint from both sides. However, tensions remain high, and any misstep could lead to even greater instability. World leaders have issued statements condemning the violence, urging diplomatic solutions. The bigger question is, how far will Israel go to neutralize the threats that surround it? And how will Syria, already devastated by years of civil war, respond to such a forceful act of aggression? The potential diplomatic consequences are significant, with the UN and other international bodies likely to intervene to prevent further escalation. According to reports, Israeli forces launched a series of airstrikes on key military targets in Syria, including weapons depots and missile sites. These targets were believed to be linked to Iran and Hezbollah, with Israel's government making it clear that their primary objective was to prevent the transfer of advanced weaponry to these militant groups. The Israeli Defense Forces, IDF, carried out these operations with precision, using the latest technology and advanced intelligence to strike high-priority targets. As always, Israel's military strategy revolves around neutralizing threats before they become a direct danger to its citizens. But such strikes rarely go unnoticed, and Syria's defense forces retaliated with anti-aircraft fire and missile strikes aimed at Israeli jets. The immediate aftermath of this attack has left Syria reeling. Key infrastructure has been destroyed, and while the full extent of the damage is still being assessed, the attack is being viewed as a severe blow to the Syrian government's military capabilities. Military experts suggest that this could significantly weaken Syria's defensive posture, making it more vulnerable to future attacks. Civilians in the affected areas are facing a dire situation, with many losing their homes and access to essential services. The bigger question is, what happens next? Will this attack lead to an all-out war, or will it simply be another chapter in the ongoing saga of Middle Eastern conflicts? Interviews with military experts indicate that while an all-out war is unlikely, the region remains on edge. Affected civilians express their fears and hopes for peace, highlighting the human cost of these military actions. Gap 3S. To truly understand the current events unfolding in the Middle East, it's essential to look back at the historical alliances and enmities that have shaped the region. For centuries, the Middle East has been a complex tapestry of shifting alliances and rivalries, influenced by a myriad of factors including religion, ethnicity, and geopolitical interests. Gap 2S. One of the most significant alliances is the long-standing relationship between Iran and Hezbollah. This alliance has been a cornerstone of regional politics, with Iran providing financial and military support to Hezbollah, which in turn acts as a proxy force in Lebanon and beyond. This relationship has been a major point of contention for Israel, which views Hezbollah as a direct threat to its security. Gap 2S. On the other hand, the alliance between Israel and the United States has been a critical factor in shaping the region's dynamics. The U.S. provides extensive military aid and political support to Israel, which in turn influences Israel's strategic decisions and military actions. This partnership has often put the U.S. at odds with other regional players, further complicating the geopolitical landscape. Gap 2S. The rivalry between Saudi Arabia and Iran is another key element to consider. These two nations represent the leading powers of Sunni and Shia Islam respectively, and their competition for dominance has fueled conflicts in countries like Yemen and Syria. Saudi Arabia's alignment with Western powers and its opposition to Iran's influence in the region has led to a volatile and often violent standoff. Gap 2S. These historical alliances and enmities are not just relics of the past, they continue to influence current events in profound ways. The recent Israeli airstrikes on Syria, for example, cannot be fully understood without considering Israel's ongoing efforts to counter Iranian influence in the region. Similarly, Syria's alliances with Iran and Russia shape its response to such attacks and its broader military strategy. Gap 2S. Understanding these historical relationships helps to shed light on the motivations behind the actions of various states and non-state actors in the Middle East. It also underscores the complexity of the region's politics, where today's events are deeply rooted in a long history of alliances and rivalries. Gap 2S. As we continue to monitor the situation, it's crucial to keep these historical contexts in mind. They not only explain why certain actions are taken, but also help predict future developments. The intricate web of alliances and enmities in the Middle East will undoubtedly continue to influence the region's trajectory for years to come. Gap 3S. As we look ahead to the potential future scenarios and outcomes of this escalating conflict, it's crucial to consider the various factors at play and the expert predictions that provide insight into the geopolitical implications. Gap 2S. One potential scenario is a further escalation of hostilities between Israel and Syria, which could draw in other regional powers and lead to a broader conflict. Experts warn that such an escalation could destabilize the region even further, potentially sparking a larger war that involves multiple nations and non-state actors. Gap 2S. On the other hand, there is also a possibility of diplomatic intervention. International actors like the United Nations, the United States and Russia could step in to mediate and de-escalate tensions. While this path is fraught with challenges, it offers a glimmer of hope for a peaceful resolution. Gap 2S. Another critical factor to consider is the role of proxy forces. Iran's support for Hezbollah and other militias in the region could lead to a protracted multi-front conflict that complicates any efforts at peace. Similarly, Israel's alliances with Western powers, particularly the United States, could influence its strategic decisions and military actions moving forward. Gap 2S. Geopolitical analysts also highlight the potential economic implications of the conflict. Prolonged instability in the Middle East could disrupt global oil supplies, leading to economic repercussions far beyond the region. This could, in turn, pressure international actors to seek a swift resolution to prevent further economic fallout. Gap 2S. Finally, we must consider the humanitarian impact. Continued conflict could lead to a significant increase in civilian casualties and displacements, exacerbating the already dire refugee crisis in the region. Human rights organizations are calling for immediate action to protect vulnerable populations and ensure humanitarian aid reaches those in need. Gap 2S. In summary, the future of the Israel-Syria conflict is uncertain, with multiple possible outcomes ranging from further escalation to potential diplomatic resolution. The actions taken by regional and international players in the coming days and weeks will be crucial in determining the trajectory of this conflict. As always, we will continue to monitor the situation closely and provide updates as they unfold. Gap 2S. Thank you for staying informed with us. Now let's move on to our conclusion and call to action. Gap 3S. As the conflict between Israel and Syria continues to unfold, the humanitarian impact cannot be overstated. Civilians on both sides find themselves caught in the crossfire, facing the devastating consequences of war. Families are being displaced, homes are being destroyed, and lives are being lost in this tragic chapter of an ongoing conflict. Gap 2S. The international community has begun to mobilize to address the growing humanitarian crisis. Organizations such as the Red Cross, Doctors Without Borders, and the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees are working tirelessly to provide aid to those affected. These groups are delivering essential supplies like food, clean water, medical care, and temporary shelter to displaced families. Gap 2S. Despite these efforts, the situation on the ground remains dire. Access to affected areas is often restricted due to ongoing hostilities, making it challenging to deliver much-needed aid. Humanitarian corridors have been proposed, but the success of these initiatives heavily depends on cooperation from both warring sides. Gap 2S. In addition to immediate relief, long-term support is crucial for rebuilding communities and helping civilians recover from the trauma of war. Educational programs, mental health services, and economic opportunities are essential components of a comprehensive humanitarian response. Gap 2S. The plight of children in conflict zones is particularly heartbreaking. Many have been orphaned or separated from their families, and the lack of stability and security has disrupted their education and development. International child welfare organizations are calling for urgent action to protect these vulnerable young lives and ensure they have a future beyond the conflict. Gap 2S. We must also recognize the brave efforts of local volunteers and aid workers who risk their lives daily to provide assistance. Their dedication and courage are a beacon of hope in these dark times, reminding us of the resilience and strength of the human spirit. Gap 2S. As global citizens, it is our responsibility to support these humanitarian efforts. Whether through donations, raising awareness, or advocating for peaceful resolutions, every action counts. The road to recovery will be long and arduous, but with collective effort and compassion, we can help those affected rebuild their lives and communities. Gap 3S. Now, let's move on to our conclusion and call to action. Gap 3S. In the digital age, media coverage plays a critical role in shaping public perception of conflicts. The ongoing conflict between Israel and Syria is no exception. Different news outlets, both mainstream and alternative, are providing varying narratives and analyses, influencing how audiences around the world understand the events. Gap 2S. Major news organizations like CNN, BBC, and Al Jazeera offer extensive coverage, each with its own editorial stance. CNN tends to highlight the strategic implications of the conflict, often focusing on the geopolitical aspects. BBC provides a more balanced view, incorporating historical context and humanitarian angles. Al Jazeera, on the other hand, emphasizes the regional impact and the voices of those directly affected by the conflict. Gap 2S. Social media platforms like Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram have also become battlegrounds for information and propaganda. Hashtags and viral posts can sway public opinion in real time, making it challenging to discern fact from fiction. Citizen journalists and influencers add another layer to the narrative, often providing on-the-ground perspectives that mainstream media may overlook. Gap 2S. The role of social media in this conflict cannot be understated. It has democratized information dissemination, but also opened the floodgates for misinformation and biased reporting. Algorithms amplify sensational content, sometimes at the expense of balanced reporting. This has led to polarized views and heightened tensions among various communities worldwide. Gap 2S. It is crucial for viewers to critically evaluate the sources of their information. Cross-referencing multiple news outlets and being aware of their potential biases can help informing a more nuanced understanding of the conflict. Media literacy has never been more important as the stakes are incredibly high. Gap 2S. In the end, how the conflict is portrayed in the media will significantly influence public opinion and potentially policy decisions. As consumers of news, we have a responsibility to seek out accurate information and challenge narratives that may be misleading or incomplete. Gap 3S. Now let's move on to our conclusion and call to action. Gap 3S. The economic impact of the ongoing conflict between Israel and Syria is profound and far-reaching. Trade routes, investment opportunities, and regional stability are all being severely affected. The disruption in trade routes has led to significant economic losses for both countries and their neighbors. Key industries such as agriculture, manufacturing, and tourism are facing unprecedented challenges. Gap 2S. Investors are wary, pulling out capital and halting new projects due to the increased risk. This has led to a decline in economic growth and a rise in unemployment rates, exacerbating the already fragile economic conditions in the region. The conflict has also led to increased military spending, diverting funds away from crucial sectors like education, healthcare, and infrastructure. Gap 2S. Regional stability is under threat as neighboring countries brace for potential economic fallout. The instability has strained diplomatic relations and could lead to a realignment of economic alliances. Countries that are traditionally trade partners may seek new economic relationships to mitigate the risks associated with the conflict. Gap 2S. International businesses are also impacted, with many multinational corporations reassessing their operations and supply chains in the region. The uncertainty has led to increased costs and logistical challenges affecting global markets. Gap 2S. In conclusion, the economic ramifications of the Israel-Syria conflict are extensive, impacting not just the immediate region, but the global economy as well. The path to economic recovery will be long and complex, requiring concerted efforts from both local and international stakeholders. Gap 3S. Now let's move on to our conclusion and call to action. Gap 3S. In the modern era, technology has fundamentally transformed the landscape of warfare. The conflict between Israel and Syria is no exception, with advanced technologies playing a pivotal role in both offensive and defensive strategies. Gap 2S. One of the most significant advancements has been the use of drones. These unmanned aerial vehicles are capable of conducting surveillance, gathering intelligence, and even carrying out targeted strikes with pinpoint accuracy. Israel in particular has been at the forefront of drone technology, using it to monitor Syrian movements and execute precision attacks. Gap 2S. On the other side, Syria has also been leveraging technology to bolster its defenses. Cyber warfare has become a crucial component of modern conflict, with both nations engaging in cyber attacks aimed at disrupting each other's military and civilian infrastructure. These cyber operations can cripple communication networks, disable critical systems, and spread disinformation, creating chaos and confusion. Gap 2S. Advanced surveillance techniques have also reshaped the battlefield. Satellite imagery, reconnaissance planes, and sophisticated listening devices allow both countries to gather real-time data on troop movements, weapon deployments, and tactical plans. This information is invaluable for making strategic decisions and anticipating enemy actions. Gap 2S. The integration of artificial intelligence and machine learning into military operations has further enhanced the capabilities of armed forces. AI-driven analytics can process vast amounts of data to identify patterns, predict outcomes, and recommend optimal courses of action. These technologies are not only making warfare more efficient, but also more lethal. Gap 2S. However, the increasing reliance on technology also raises ethical and legal questions. The use of autonomous weapons systems, the potential for collateral damage, and the risk of escalation through cyber attacks are all concerns that need to be addressed. As warfare evolves, so too must the frameworks that govern it. Gap 2S. In conclusion, technology is a double-edged sword in modern warfare, offering both unprecedented capabilities and significant challenges. Understanding its role in the Israel-Syria conflict provides insight into the future of military engagements worldwide. Gap 3S. Now let's move on to our conclusion and call to action. Gap 3S. As we near the end of our deep dive into the conflict between Israel and Syria, let's take a moment to recap the key points we've covered. Gap 2S. We began by introducing the recent attack that has escalated tensions between these two nations, setting the stage for our detailed exploration. Gap 2S. Understanding the historical context, we trace the roots of the conflict and the significant events that have shaped the current landscape. Gap 2S. We then examine the recent developments leading up to the attack, providing a timeline of escalating actions and reactions. Gap 2S. The specifics of the attack itself were laid out, shedding light on the tactics used and the immediate consequences. Gap 2S. We discussed the political fallout within both countries, highlighting the internal and external pressures faced by their leaders. Gap 2S. The international response was scrutinized, showing how global powers and neighboring countries are reacting to this crisis. Gap 2S. The immediate aftermath and its impact on civilians were detailed, emphasizing the human cost of the conflict. Gap 2S. We also delved into the historical alliances and enmities that continue to influence the dynamics of the Middle East. Gap 2S. Future scenarios and expert predictions offered insight into what might come next, based on current trends and historical patterns. Gap 2S. The humanitarian impact and aid efforts were highlighted, reminding us of the ongoing need for support and intervention. Gap 2S. Media coverage and public perception were analyzed, showing how information and propaganda shape our understanding of the conflict. Gap 2S. The economic impact of the conflict was considered, exploring how prolonged tensions could affect not just the region but the global economy. Gap 2S. Finally, we discussed the role of technology in modern warfare, illustrating how advancements are changing the nature of conflict. Gap 2S. As we conclude, it's crucial to stay informed and engaged. Conflicts like this one are complex and multifaceted, requiring our attention and understanding. Gap 2S. Share this video with your network, subscribe to our channel, and click the notification bell to stay updated on this evolving story and other important global issues. Your engagement helps us continue to bring you in-depth analysis and breaking news. Thank you for watching, and remember, staying informed is the first step towards making a difference. Gap 3S. Now let's move on to our conclusion and call to action. While Israel's attack on Syria may seem like just another escalation in a long-standing conflict, it's important to remember the larger context. This is a region steeped in political, military, and religious complexities. The impact of this attack will reverberate across the entire Middle East, and how Syria, Israel, and the international community respond will shape the future of the region for years to come. The stakes are incredibly high and the world is watching closely. Do you think Israel's attack on Syria will lead to a larger conflict, or will tensions subside? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the notification bell so you never miss another update on this ongoing story. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more breaking news and in-depth analysis on the Middle East and beyond. Share this video with your friends and family to keep the conversation going. Your engagement helps us bring you more content like this. We value your opinions and look forward to hearing from you. Until next time, stay informed and stay safe.